Hi, Michelle. Thanks for talking about that, actually. I was just going to say sorry about my kids, they're in the back and making lots of noises. I was in a shoulder stand in one class, and the instructor came over and said, "Can I please adjust you?" And I said, "Sure." So he actually grabbed my ankles and he said, "You don't do anything." And he yanked me up. Now, I have no issues with that. Sorry, again, serenading you with some lovely music in the background. But I mean, would that be an example of something you should probably not do?
Absolutely, absolutely. So here's the risk, and we are going to talk about this later in more depth, but the risk is that you can, I mean, like, you don't know what's gone on in that student's body. You could dislocate something, you could, you could cause injury. It actually goes back to Carrie was talking about one of her teachers a couple of weeks ago, and he had actually adjusted somebody in a distal way where he took their hands and pulled this is my understanding. If Carrie's on, you can correct me if I misunderstood, but he took the hands or the wrist or whatever and pulled the hands down, and that can cause injury, right? So what we don't want to do is grab or pull, or these are things that can cause injury. Any other questions before I pop back to the slide?
I've got a, oh, sorry, go for it.
I was just going to say an option that I've added in my classes for supporting some type of an adjustment or assist in like shoulder stand or anytime legs go up is sometimes putting my fist between their calf or their ankle or feet that they can squeeze and think about activation through the inner thighs rather than like pulling or putting their body in a certain spot. Again, kind of trying to build some proprioceptive awareness around muscular engagement that should remain.
Sure, Max, that's great. That's actually how my teacher teaches it as well. She either teaches 2 fingers on the heels or fist between the ankles or fist between the inner thigh, but that was before me too. I mean, we do have to be aware that in the last, I mean, gosh, since I've been trained, so much has happened in terms of sexual stuff and misconduct and inappropriate touch. And so I think that's a great one. Stay with the calves, stay above the knees or below the knees, wherever you are, right? You know what I'm saying? Like, stay with the lower part of the leg, guys. I like to also put my 2 fingers on their heels. So then I'm not really touching them, I'm telling them to, like, okay, so activate through Pada Bandha, right? So my fingers are on the bottoms of their feet, and then that will help to create engagement all the way down to Mula Bandha. But again, some people are really particular about their feet, guys. So just understand, I've had students come up to me and say, "You can adjust me, but don't touch my feet." I've actually had people say that to me more as an instructor than I've had people say, like, "I don't want adjustments," or "I have scoliosis," or "I have this," or "I have that." People really, it's a real thing. So yeah. Somebody was next.
Yes, I think I've got a good example of like maybe bad adjustments. Basically, what happened to me, I was injured because my teacher adjusted me and I couldn't walk properly for a while. What happened, I was like in Dhanurasana, like bow pose, and the guy like came over, like stood with the legs on one and other side of my body and like lifted me up, so basically, like, I was holding my feet and he kind of lifted me up and like I had a facet joint irritation and it kind of shooted down my glute and affected the way I walked, and it took me really long to recover. I had to cycle to work for a while because I couldn't walk. So yeah, definitely, like, teacher can injure you seriously.
Yeah, I think that we have to be very careful. There's another one I'm going to show you today where I'm sure a lot of you have seen, where people will take their hands and put them on your shoulders for, like, cobra pose or something like that. And I have an alternative to that, that's a little bit more like one size fits all. See, the problem with some of these adjustments is they're not inherently bad adjustments, but they're not right for every person, right? So we need to use adjustments in a public class that are appropriate for every person, that we could give to any person, and they wouldn't feel, and they would feel, it would convey the intention, right? But not all adjustments are good for every person. Any other questions?
So saying the foot where they couldn't get their foot properly down, I guess you wouldn't take your foot and help press it down just so that they can get the feeling of what it is to be right because of the foot issue?
You can also take your hand as well, and just with your hand. So you squat down and you sort of put your hand on there and say, press into this outer edge. And then sometimes I'll even take my other hand and slide it underneath their arch. And I'll say, so press into the outer edge. Now you feel your inner arch lift, and you're like, yeah, I'm like, that's what we're going for. You know, so sometimes you have to do that sort of stuff. Again, most people who don't want their feet touched will tell you.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Any other questions, guys? Yes, Max?
I have a question on adjustments during wheel, because I have students that will like legitimately ask for kind of a spot in wheel to like maybe hold their back. And some students, it's just, you know, fingertips to the backs of their ribs as a little extra support, or maybe moving their chest towards their wrists. And then other students, I end up being the thing holding them up. And that puts me in a position where I don't like that. I don't feel safe. I don't think they're safe. And so I'd like to maybe talk about, you know, the right way to do that. If you're going to go over that later, that's fine. But yeah.
Oh yeah, no, let's do that. Hold on one second. Okay, I've called the child. We'll see how this works. So I'm going to show you guys how to properly adjust in wheel. Did Christine go over this yesterday? Okay. All righty, so let's do it. Lexus. I need you. Okay. So the first thing that we're going to just look at is, this is actually going to be a great example because a lot of people who want an adjustment don't really have the strength to do it. So lay down for me, honey. On your back. Okay. And so what I want you to do is put your feet on the ground and walk your, knees up to the sky. Walk your heels close to your glutes. Put your hands right here on my feet. Yeah, just like that. Just exactly like that. So you guys can see my feet, yes? She has her hands on top of my feet, and her heels are as close to her glutes as possible. So I don't know if she can do it. I don't know if she's strong enough. Do you think you're strong enough? I think you're strong enough. You want to give it a shot? Okay. So when you're ready, press into your feet and hands to come all the way up. Press up. Yeah, keep going. Straighten. Yeah. Nope. You got to come up. Hips up. You can't do it, can you? No. Okay. Are you sure you want to try one more time? Do you want to see me do it? Yes. To see? Okay. So I'm gonna demo. This is really like a beginner wheel. So just this is what we want you to do. Okay. You bring your heels to your hips, your hands next to your ears. You're gonna press up like this. Okay. And then you come down like that. Easy. Okay. Think you can try? No. Well, we'll give it one more try. Okay. Okay. Perfect. Yeah. Okay. 1, 2, 3. Press up. Hands and hips. Yeah. No. Come. Yeah. Your arms. One side of my body refuses to do it. Okay. Try again. One more time. Are you gonna try? Lift up this. There we go. Now put your feet down flat. Yeah. There it is. There it is. Now, she does not have the strength to hold that, but if she had been in yoga practice for long enough, she would have had the strength. I wouldn't have had to touch her at all. So that's the way I adjust wheel, is I don't lift them up, Max. I have them put their hands on the tops of my feet. That gives them enough space, usually, to push up. If they can hold plank for a minute, they can usually push up. And it sometimes does look like that, guys. But I typically don't put my hands underneath their thoracic spine and pull them up. They usually can do it without that. And if they can't, back to bridge pose, you need to build more strength. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And I like that you stand behind them. I've done that before, and sometimes I feel a little bit weird straddling someone's head, but at the same time, I think it is a good position for that pose where you don't necessarily put yourself as a teacher in kind of a risky position.
Yeah, so that's a way to get them into it. Now, the other way that you would do it, and I think I have a video on it. I hope I have a video on it. But the other way, if they're an advanced yogi and they're trying to get deeper into wheel, then you actually straddle them. So they are, imagine that they're in wheel. So we have to really use our imagination. Okay, guys, just bear with me. So imagine that somebody's in wheel right here. I'm going to sit like this. Their hands are right here, right? And I'm going to hold their elbows like in. So their elbows are stacking over their wrists, and my knees are what's keeping that going. Does that make sense? They're going to press into the earth and come up into wheel. I'm going to take their upper arms and just gently wrap away from the midline. And that's going to get them to get deeper into thoracic. They'll be able to push their thoracic spine closer to me. Now, again, that's an awesome, awesome, awesome adjustment, but only in this day and age, only with somebody that you know, right? So in this day and age, these more intimate adjustments are only done with somebody that you know and feels comfortable with you.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah. So one adjustment for wheel is to get them up, and the other adjustment for wheel is to get them deeper. Again, it goes back to the intention. Is it stability is my intention? Then I have one adjustment for stability. Is deepening my intention? I have one adjustment for deepening. Any other questions? Yes, no, maybe?
So I have a question. I was doing online classes and I had a student who was like, oh, I just use the Pilates ball to go into wheel. And I was saying, well, I would rather you do bridge to work up your strength than just to like relax on a ball, which was great for stretching, but not good for strength.
Sure.
So
I agree with you. Absolutely. Absolutely. So bridge is going to be good. Plank is going to be good. All of those postures are going to be really good to prepare that student to get into wheel.
mm-hmm. Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Any other questions?
Just super quickly, Michelle, what do you feel about blocks under their hands for people who don't want to have physical contact right now?
Absolutely. I put them up against the wall. In fact, I don't know, I worked with somebody this week on that very thing. If you're on, you can come on, and I won't say who you are, but if you're on and you feel like sharing, we did that this week because she had never gotten into wheel. There was some, you know, just she was wondering, questioning about like the mechanics of it in her body, right? And so I had her put the blocks up against the wall. I showed her, I put my hands on the blocks, I got up. She did, she put her hands on the blocks. Now she couldn't get all the way up. She's still working on strength, but she got all the extension in the spine that she needs to get up, right? So you saw with Alexis, she couldn't, she had no, it was like her back was flat, right? Because she doesn't have the extension. She spent all day like this for like the last 12 years, you know, watching devices, you know, I'm sure they do that more than they play with people outside these days. But so she's going to have to really work on extension, you know, but if you can get from like a flat on your back to the crown of your head on the ground, even if you can't lift yourself up, your back has already gone into the amount of extension required to get into wheel.
Cool, thanks.
Yeah. Can I demo that? Sure can. Okay. You guys are gonna just travel around my house with me today. Ready? Okay. Okay. All right, so. Hello. So I have 2 blocks, and I put them right up against the wall. Now you can do this a couple of ways. if you have baseboards and you want to put them up like this,
Michelle, you've frozen for me and a couple other people. Or a few other.
Okay, she did for me too. I thought it was just me because it kept freezing all morning.
I'm glad I'm not the only one.
are you
Okay,
guys?
I think you're back then.
Hello? Are we back?
Yeah.
Yes, we're back. Okay. Okay, so here we are. Fingers are wrapped over the edge of the block. Press into the blocks and come all the way up. And then come down chin to chest, brings it down. Questions?
I have a question. When I have been doing this, I'm just realizing this now that my arms are like farther away from my head. So would you recommend like continuing to do that and trying to like over time gradually get my hands in, or go to the blocks with the hands in and try that way?
So I would try with it tighter and see if it is doable for you. It might be like just the range of motion that you currently are working with. I'd have to see you do it to tell you what's really appropriate for you. But if you want to try it at the wall with the blocks, it's not going to hurt you. It just might, I think always, I feel more comfortable seeing somebody do it and then telling them how to adjust themselves, or if they need to bring their hands in and stuff like that, then I feel just telling you to do something, right? So I think it would be safe for you to try this, but if you really want me to take a look, shoot me an email.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Michelle, could you have him at an angle, like using the skirting, for example, to support the blocks? I think I was told that once in the workshop if people were quite tight on the shoulder.
Yes, you could do that.
We'll have to be sure that the block wouldn't slip off, though, I guess.
Yes, yeah, as long as it's stable enough, yes, you can do it that way.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions?
I just remembered that the reason I had that question about my hands being farther apart was because when you were showing the adjustment, you said rotate the femurs in external rotation, or was it internal?
So it's
not femurs, the humerus.
Don't worry, I do it all the time. So you're externally rotating the biceps and the triceps, which will in turn externally rotate the humerus, right? And so yes, that's what we're going for, is external rotation.
So when I do that with my arm by myself, my whole elbow is like opening up.
Well, so we don't want to do it that much. And so that's why I'm having my legs here to keep those elbows stacked over the wrist. And once they're straight, they shouldn't move. Then at that point, I'm only working with the soft tissue in the arms.
Okay. So it's more of like the way that you're using the muscles right here than actually like turning from the shoulder.
Yes.
Okay.
Because remember, the shoulder's super complicated. So I can be, so what we are in, hold on. So what we're in wheel is we're in flexion, external rotation, hold on, elevation. Flexion, external rotation, elevation. There's so many things going on because the shoulders elevate and depress, they protract and retract, and then they external, internal, flexion, extension. Way more stuff going on than the pelvis. Yeah.
So where does most of the strength come from because I can't do wheelhouse. And I think it's because I'm lacking strength through the shoulders and maybe the upper back.
So it comes from everywhere. It comes from your lats. It comes from your deltoids that go over your shoulder girdle. Your biceps, your triceps have to be strong. Like, even you have to have strength in your pectoral muscles. If your pectoral muscles aren't strong and can't turn on, you're not going to be able to get into wheel. So wheel is like a total upper body like workout. And it's all of the back bends. People really forget though about the lats when it comes to yoga and back bends and inversions. Like, that is seriously one of the reasons that a lot of people cannot get into inversions, is because they have no strength in their lats. Well, why don't they have strength in their lats? And what's going on? Because a lot of times with so this pulling motion that we have here and pulling motion here, we don't do that in yoga, right? So you have to do other things to strengthen those areas of the body and the back body.
Exactly. That's where I was going with this, because I have a personal trainer background and the gyms have been closed. So I've not been able to, get in there and work out. They just reopened. I will be going this week, thank goodness. Okay, so to enhance movements like this in yoga, get with the weights.
Yes. And that's why I always say, because what is stability? It's strength and flexibility. If we're all flexible and we're too much, so it goes back to Sthira Sukha Asana, right? So too much Sthira and you're a dry riverbed. Too much Sukha and you're a boggy marsh, right? You have to have Sthira and Sukha to have a flowing river. Yeah. And it's the same in our asana practice. You have to have the strength. And honestly, sometimes yoga provides that strength, but sometimes it doesn't. And with the way that we practice in studio and it being so fast, and it's so hard to teach strength in asana in a 60-minute flow class. I mean, that's my background is vinyasa as far as the studio background goes. And, how do you really convey to somebody that they need to be engaging every muscle in their body in Warrior 1, Warrior 2, that it's not just your quads, that it's not just your hamstrings or your glutes. Like, it is literally every muscle in the entire pose needs to be turned on in some way. So teaching that in a 60-minute public class is super challenging. So if we can get them into the gym and we can get them strengthening out there, then when they come back, if they come in for a private or a one-on-one, then I can help them to learn how to articulate the muscles to support the pose in a more holistic way. But it's going to be really hard for them to build the strength they need with just yoga in a studio class.
It is. It's challenging for sure. So I actually incorporate free weights with my classes. I did when the students were okay with it. I tell them to bring in the weights that they liked, because I really didn't have a bunch of weights to give out to them. And then we just, for 5 minutes during yoga, we would do some, arm stuff. So they liked it.
Sure. Awesome. Yeah.
I have a question, MG. So, hi. So for me, I don't know if it's a strength issue. I think like my shoulders are pretty strong for wheel, and I've just like done some cross training strength wise. But like I used to actually, before I found yoga, I was doing taking contortion classes at a circus school type of place, and the instructor always told me that it was like my upper back that was not flexible. And so I don't even know if like it's a different way of the way they kind of get you to get flexible. It's more of like a pushing thing. So I would like, kind of similar to what you were saying, like my hands would be on her ankles and she'd be behind me. And then she would have me push towards her shins with my arms like that. But then she would like try to bend my upper back. And like, I've never been able to get my flexibility in that region. So I don't know if like there's something that could help with that or.
Sure. So let's first go back to like the anatomy of it. So again, when we're looking at the spine, and we're looking at the thoracic. So the thoracic starts here, right here, and it moves all the way up to like here. And so these little guys, these sphenoid processes on the back of the spine, they don't have any place to go. They don't have any, like, they run into each other real quick. Okay. So what I would say is that your muscles are what is locking or holding you in that pattern. And I would recommend like supported fish for like 30 minutes a day. Let restorative take care of it. Right? Because it'll slowly creep, and those muscles will slowly start to relax and release. And over time, they'll learn how to let go. And that's what I would do.
Yeah, I definitely feel like it's the muscles, because my lower back is like the default for bending. Like I feel like that part is flexible. But then once I get into the upper back, it's having a hard time getting that openness there. And it just doesn't go. Well, I guess I have to work on it, but
yeah,
that's one of the things that I've wanted.
A blanket roll under your back and like supported fish like that, maybe for 30 minutes. And then once that feels like pretty easy, and then you go to like the 2 blocks under your back, you know, one at like the shoulder blades, one at the base of the head, just open like that. Remember, it should feel good. So if it doesn't feel good, walk your shoulders onto that block, like so that you feel like the block is literally right across your shoulder blades. And then just let all of this open, you know, because probably it's that the back muscles are locked long, the front muscles are locked short. And so what we need to do is use the block, use the prop to let those muscles relax.
So do you think there's like, if I do like wheel, or after all these preparatory poses, if I'm warm enough to get into wheel, is that kind of like, I guess movement into, because I do feel like also the pressure in my wrists. And then when I have my arms and they straighten out more, that's where they come off of the pressure comes off the wrist. Is that kind of bouncing, or I guess that movement towards into a straight arm dangerous in any way, or is that okay? Or should I try to just hold as far as I can get into straight arms?
What I hear you saying is when you get towards straight, the wrist doesn't hurt anymore.
Yeah, once they straighten, it's almost like the pressure gets taken off my wrist, because that's where I feel a lot of the pressure in wheel is my wrist.
It's probably, and I'm not sure because I am not looking at you, but I would imagine that you are, you know, having some sort of compression, hyperextension in the wrist. The angle from your wrist to your elbow is too extreme, and that is causing some sort of pain or pressure in your wrist. Once you get it straight, that angle's gone. Yeah. So what can you do to circumvent that? Like right off the bat, blocks underneath your hand, like I showed just a second ago. That should alleviate the wrist pain even as you're going up.
Okay.
I want to say a disclaimer for this wrist pain, guys. Please, please, please do not practice to the point where you hurt yourself. And if you do hurt yourself in some way, shape, or form, wrist injury, ankle injury, knee, back off of practice. Wrist injuries can take up to 8 weeks, as can our, what's it called, ankle injuries. So these are like long-term things that you have to work with, and the more we work the more we do when we have an injury, the longer it's going to take to heal. So just listen to your body.
Thank you.
Hi, Michelle.
Yes.
Hi. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, it's Lizzie. I'm from Scotland. Summer solstice blessings to everybody.
Hello.
Hi. I've not long joined in actually, so sorry about that. Should have done that earlier. Now, thank you for having me, by the way, and this is just something I've wanted to do for a long time. I know that I'm more than capable of doing that without a doubt. But when I start to go up into it, I have a mental block telling me, you can't do it. And I go back down and I give in straight away.
Okay.
And I try again.
Yeah.
And I have the same problem. So I know I have the strength.
Yeah.
I know I can do it because I've done it many times before, but then the block is there.
Okay.
And so I've talked myself out of it.
Okay, so why have you judged yourself as not being able to do wheel?
I've done it in the past, no problem at all. And then just recently, it's tough. And I don't know why.
Okay.
I start it and then I stop it.
So if you ask yourself, why have I judged myself as being unable to do wheel? What's the first thing that pops into your mind?
Not a physical weakness, but a mental weakness. It's just no, just don't do it.
What is there fear behind it?
Probably. I think you're probably right, but I'm not sure. I don't fear it when I see it, and I've done it in the past.
Yeah.
So
I guess what comes up with me is, so this is one of the ways that we can coach our students. So remember, yoga teachers are not therapists. We are yoga teachers. But this will come up. People will say, in fact, I have one client who is strong enough to do chaturanga, but she will not do it because she doesn't think she's strong enough. And so there's a lot of limiting beliefs around these things, right? And so you have to identify what is holding you back. So you have to ask yourself, why am I afraid to do wheel? And if you sit there long enough and don't try to force an answer, it will come up. All of a sudden you'll be like, oh yeah, I think that I'm too old, or oh yeah, I think that I'm too this, or oh yeah, I think I can't do it, I'll fall, you know, whatever it is. And so then you identify that. Well, let's just pretend for a second, because I've heard this a lot. You know, I take a lot of calls from people, they want training, they want to do training, and they'll say to me, you know, I'm not 25, you know, I can't bend this way, you know, I can't bend that way. Can I really be a
So the excuses are there already.
Yes. Can I really be a yoga teacher? And I say, of course you can, you know, because you're going to serve the populations that are like you, right? And so sometimes those are limiting beliefs. So what you do is you say, oh, I've judged myself as not being yoga teacher material, right? I'm just making up a scenario, right? And so how do I clear that? How do I get over that? Well, I just sort of like, I have to touch into the heart, my heart, that my heart is scared. My heart is scared that I won't be accepted. My heart is scared that, you know, XYZ is going to happen, that whatever, you fill in the blank. And so I like to put my hands on my heart and I just close my eyes and I say, I forgive myself for judging myself as not being yoga teacher material. I forgive myself for judging a yoga teacher. I forgive myself for buying into the idea that a yoga teacher is supposed to look or be a certain way. And then I affirm that. I say, I am actively accepting my new role as teacher. I am, you know, I am fully engaged with the process of learning to teach other people yoga. And so then what we're doing, it's similar to a cognitive behavioral reframe, right? Except for we're not doing that, the student is doing it. So if you were working with a professional, they would help you see this, hopefully, right? Sure. But if you're working with your student, you're just saying, find the judgment, forgive yourself for believing it, affirm that you are what you want to be today in the present moment. And then they do their work. And then hopefully, you know, let's say you and I are working together. Now, hopefully on your off time or break time, or maybe tonight or whatever, you will say, okay, I'm going to do some journaling around this, you know, and that just reinforces it even more. The more times that you can forgive yourself for buying into these limiting beliefs and let go of the idea that you are something that you are not, the better off you're going to be. And I saw in the chat that somebody was like, you know, some of our students don't know what they're afraid of or don't know what's really bothering them. Sure, that's absolutely right. Your students are only going to be aware of what they're aware of, and don't push it. Again, like, see what I'm saying? Like, here's the difference. Here's a real clear difference between a yoga teacher, a yoga therapist, and a therapist. A yoga teacher and a yoga therapist are educators, right? We say, this is what you do with it once you figure out what's bothering you, okay? Now, and this is yoga. And I always take it back to the Yoga Sutras. Patanjali says there are 5 mental fluctuations. There's truth, perception, and verbalization. What is true? I'm a divine being in a human experience, and that is literally the only thing that's true. Everything else is my perception of the world. Everything else is my story, right? So then I can easily, so I'm actually working with my students within the scaffolding of the Yoga Sutras. And then I say, okay, so we have a perception of ourselves. Oh, I made a judgment on myself. Or you could say I made a judgment on another person or another population even. We're seeing that a lot right now, right?
And it's that simple, isn't it?
It is, it's literally that simple.
It's that simple, yeah.
It is. And then we're like, oh my gosh, I've judged this person, this population, this, you know, country, this store as bad or wrong, but is that true? Nope, not true. Just a being and an experience, right? So we take it back to that, we keep going back to that, we keep going back to the sutras, and we teach that. The idea is that the students will pick it up and go home and do it on their own, not that we will be a facilitator for that, right? But a therapist is actually a facilitator, and they're like, how does this make you feel? What comes up for you around these things? See, that's not our job. Right? Our job is to educate. Here are the sutras. This is how we think as a human being. This is what the sutras say about thinking. This is what the sutras say about yoga, quieting those chitta vrittis, right? What is chitta vritti? Even truth is chitta vritti, right? Even truth is chitta vritti. But it's the closest thing we have to a reality behind the kleshas.
Yeah,
right?
Because we are the teachers. So you give us the tool and we go away with that tool and we use it to its best effect. And we are our own teachers, having been taught by you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's what you want to do with your students. Right. Give them the tools and then let them go do their work, right? And they can come to you and ask questions. They say, you know, I still can't do wheel. I'm still afraid. Well, you know, that's okay. You know, or they say, you know, I don't know why I'm afraid of handstand, but I'm just really afraid of it. That's okay. Maybe you don't need to know why you're afraid of handstand right now. Maybe that's not your pose today. Yeah. It's okay. We don't have to crack wide open overnight. Life is a process where we're constantly awakening. We're constantly awakening into a deeper sense of our enlightened state of being and realizing who we are and who everyone else is in the experience. And it's really beautiful because, you know, as it unfolds, it's literally like a gardenia or something, you know, as it unfolds, it just gets sweeter and sweeter and sweeter.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions?
I don't have a question, but I have a comment about that. I am a therapist, and I'm not going to try to be a therapist for you right now, but one of the things that I love about yoga is that it's about connecting the mind, body, and spirit and in an experience. And so one suggestion that I think the teachings, you know, has given me is that pay attention to all three while you're in the experience. So what we try to do is we go, oh, I'm scared, and then we go out of it. And then later on, we rely on our memory to try and experience that. But we're experiencing a memory, not an actual feeling or engagement of the spirit in that moment. So if you really want to know, it can be as simple as try that and focus on your spirit and your body or your mind while your body is doing something instead of focusing on your body and ignoring the rest until later. So that's my suggestion.
I love that. I love that. I mean, really, yoga. So we have a therapist on staff, Grace Secker. She's actually going to do the yoga therapy she's doing yoga of psychology in a couple weeks. It's a yoga therapy training that we are offering, and you guys have the option to come in and like take those just for fun. But she and I have been working together for a long time. We met at Eating Recovery. And one of the things that Grace and I always talk about is like, yoga is the philosophy that therapy is built on. So like a lot of the principles in the Yoga Sutras are like philosophy, and psychology is philosophy in application. And so we deal with like more of the philosophical teachings in the hopes that, you know, people will make those mind-body connections. So I'll say things in class like, you know, notice what thoughts, feelings, memories, sensations are arising on your mat. Welcome them, right? Feel them, and then come back to your breath. So what I'm trying to do is teach people to self-regulate with yoga, right? So I'm saying, okay, you might be in like, you know, an uncomfortable posture. Well, just feel it as sensation. What comes up for you? You know, have you ever noticed that when you're in things that maybe are have a lot of sensation, where does your mind go? Like my mind usually goes to something I'm irritated about, to be honest with you. And so I don't need to focus or fixate on that, but oftentimes things I'm irritated about, I push away, right? I don't want to connect with. I just want them to go away so I can be back into my happy-go-lucky place, right? Well, what if I'm like, no, yeah, that really bothered me. Okay, it's more about integration than it is about, you know, like working with the nitty gritty, like, or labeling or judging or compartmentalizing our thoughts, you know? So yeah. Any other questions? Awesome. Okay, so let's go back into my little screen here. So we've talked about like what we should see. So let's take Warrior 2, for example. Warrior 2, obviously, we're not in an anatomical position anymore. Why? Because the feet are in external rotation. So both legs are in external rotation, and the pelvis and the toes are not going in the same direction, right? That's Warrior 2. So now I have to say, okay, so I'm not in an anatomical position, but my body is going to behave in this asana just like it would behave in Tadasana. So is my knee stacked over my ankle in this lunge, right? Is my knee and the back leg aligned with my ankle and pelvis, okay? So this is an interesting thing that happens in Warrior 2 sometimes. And again, these pants were not the best option for you guys today. I'm really sorry. I really should have thought about this. Okay, so let's say I'm in Warrior 2. And a lot of times what you'll see is this back knee. If this front knee is coming forward, this back knee will also be slightly bent. It's how the body's distributing the weight. So here I'm in Warrior 2, and I'm a little bit forward. So I'm gonna bring my hips back. Now when I bring my hips back, I stack my knee over my ankle. Now look, my hip, my knee, and my ankle are all in one diagonal line. Right? So there's not like a knee out of place to the ankle to the thigh. So we're looking in relation to the bones and the joints. Back at it. So then we have to look at the spine and the hips. So are the hips squared towards whatever direction they're supposed to be squared towards? So for example, Warrior 2, we've talked about this many times. Many people can't square their hips to the long side of the mat. And it's not even really supposed to be that way. I think that there is in Light on Yoga some contradictory text about Warrior 2. Has anybody read this or found this yet? So in the Light on Yoga, Iyengar says, and I'm going to go from memory, but he's talking about the last sentence he says when he's talking about Warrior 2 is he says your shoulders and pelvis should be in the same plane. Okay? Does everybody understand? Your shoulders and pelvis should be in the same plane. Well, I think people, if you look at him, his shoulders and his pelvis are stacked over one another, but there's a twist in the thoracic spine, okay? So, and you can see that his pelvis is not square to the side of the mat, but it's squared at a 45-degree angle to the top of the mat, okay? So I think some teachers have taken that to be squared, that if you're stacking pelvis over hips, it must be square to the long side of the mat. And that's not necessarily the case. So again, we're looking at the knee stacking over the ankle, the hips and shoulders stacking over one another. We don't want the ribs to be splayed out and there to be a big bow in the back either. So we want the natural curve of the spine to be in the asana. And then we're also looking at, even in our Warrior 2, is my ear stacked over my pelvis, stacked over my shoulder, stacked over my hip, stacked over my ankle? Like literally, I want my ears to be stacked over my shoulders and then my ears stacked over like my ankle if I was to be in Tadasana. So you almost as a teacher have to imagine that there's a skeleton over your student that's in a neutral position. Does this make sense? Like, imagine what that would look like if we transposed a neutral skeleton over your students. Now, where is their ear in relation to their shoulder, in relation to their ankle, if they were in that neutral position? So I look at the breath, we look at the feet, we look at the knees, we look at the pelvis, we look at the spine, we look at the rib cage, we look at the collarbones. And then where is the energy? Where is the force coming into the pose? Are they engaging their quads? Are they engaging their glutes? Are they engaging the abdominal muscles, the transverse abdominals? All of these things need to be engaged. So we talked earlier about having an intention for touching. So what is my intention to touch someone? And it's going to be either to awaken or relax, to clarify, to stabilize, emphasizing, moving, grounding, or comforting. You never want your students to think that you're trying to fix them. And I often will even, like, if a student says to me, can you please, take a look at my warrior two and, fix me if I'm out of alignment. I ask them, is it comfortable? And they say, yeah, it's comfortable. I'm like, well, you don't need to be fixed. I can look at you to see if I can get you deeper into the pose, right? So you do want to reassure people that they're not doing it wrong. I mean, like, from a philosophical standpoint, you can't do this wrong. You can do things in a way that is not optimal for the load distribution in your body that could cause, pain or wear and tear on the joints. Is that wrong? I mean, philosophically, no, it's not wrong. We're trying to get our students to experience the most stera and sukha in their practice. If it's all stera and it's all painful and it's all hard and it's, again, we're like that dry riverbed. But if it's too easy, if it's too fluid, if they don't feel anything in the posture, then we're like a marsh, right? Or a swamp. We want them to both feel stable and, we want them to feel ease in their postures. So identify first, why are you compelled to touch a person? Have you cued multiple physical and directional cues? Have you demonstrated in your students' line of sight? So this is super important. Yoga Alliance is not a governing body. They're not even an accrediting body, but they do give us some legal advice, okay? And that is one of the benefits of Yoga Alliance, is that they have lawyers that have, been involved in a lot of the cases around yoga and around touch. And so they give us some advice about this stuff. And one of the advice, or one of the pieces of advice that they give us, is that we should cue physical, directional, and then if that still doesn't work, we should demo in front of our students in their line of sight before we lay a hand on them, okay? And that is to protect ourselves, and that's to make sure that, we're really checking in. Does this student actually really need this adjustment? Or is this really about me trying to put them in a position, right? And some of this stuff is unconscious. Like, I think I've told this story about going to this Ashtanga class in Austin, and the teacher, man, she was like, oh no, we've got to fix your Chaturanga. And I just looked at her like, are you kidding me right now? And there are some differences. There are some nuances between like Hatha yoga and Ashtanga yoga and Vini yoga. So one teacher might think this is right. One teacher might think this is wrong. But what I'm trying to teach you guys is a lineage-based teaching style. So you have 3 lineages to go to. You have Iyengar, you have Patabi Joyce, and you have Desikachar. And so you can go to Light on Yoga. Again, you always go back to the primary source. You can go to Light on Yoga to identify if your understanding of a posture is correct. Do not go to Yoga Journal or the internet or the Googles, the interwebs. They're not reliable. Go to Light on Yoga, okay? If you want to look at Ashtanga, there's several books on Ashtanga. Ashtanga does have a slightly different style. You can look at that, but I recommend Hatha Yoga, because really what we're doing with Vinyasa is we're taking Hatha Yoga poses and putting Surya Namaskara A and Surya Namaskara B in it as transitions, right? That's how it's mixed with Ashtanga, okay? Yes, they will be. Slides will be available. And then Vini Yoga is very different, right? Vini Yoga, where actually Anna Pilar is going to do an introduction to Vini Yoga here in a couple of weeks. And Vini Yoga is what we based yoga therapy on. And in Vini Yoga, you can have a wide stance, a short stance. You can have the arms up, you can have them down. You can, I mean, like it's really more about what feels good for the student than it is about dogmatic alignment. So we've given you these 3 lineages to go back to, right? If you have questions about the proper alignment, etc. But having an attitude that we have to put a student in a certain position because that's the right way is not of service to the student. Does that make sense? It's more of service to us and our ego and our way of doing something. Go back to these elements that I'm talking about in terms of body reading. That's really what the lecture today has been about, is body reading and being able to look at somebody's knee in relation to their ankle, in relation to their foot and the arch of their foot. And you can tell right away if something's going on. And usually you can pretty effectively determine where it's coming from. Any questions about that? Okay. All righty. So how not to touch. I told you we were going to talk about distal touching. Occurs when you clasp your hands around a body part and attempt to move it. In some cases, distal touching can cause injury depending on the force exerted on the appendage. So these are what we don't want to do. Distal touching, forceful, meandering, destabilizing, or inappropriate. So an example of distal touching would be, remember, we were talking last week, and one of the students was talking about this wide angle forward fold. It's an Ashtanga move. So you're here, you interlace the fingers behind the back, you come over, and you're folding like this. So we have seen teachers take people's fists, their hands, and try to move them lower, closer to the floor, and that can cause serious injury. We also, I'm sure you've seen, I've even done it, so don't judge yourself. If we've done these things, it's not a big deal. Hopefully everything was fine, and we're not saying it's going to cause injury every single time. That's another thing. You don't stress about it, but it has the potential to, especially if the student is hypermobile. So if I was to take somebody's hands that are clasped, even if it's in like a humble warrior, I've seen teachers, and I've actually done it too, where I've taken their hands and I've like lifted their hands so that they get more opening. Well, what's that doing? What is it doing now that I know, now that I'm a yoga therapist and I know that is causing hyperextension in the shoulder, which can over time cause issues. And if they're already hypermobile in the shoulders, it could immediately cause issues. Like I could cause an injury right then and there, right? So that's why taking and grasping something and pulling or moving, or even in triangle, like taking and like moving the arm with your hand, grasping the hand like this, that's not what we're going for, right? I typically will tell people, like for example, in triangle, they'll come in, you see this a lot of times where people are in triangle and their hands like way back here, right? So rather than me going up to them and taking their hand and moving it, I'm gonna say, bring your thumb forward. Or I might put my hand in front of their thumb and say, bring your thumb to touch my hand, right? Now I've got them to move. They've initiated the movement on their own, which is going to help their memory neurons to pick it up for the next time. Does that make sense? And so then that's going to reinforce what I'm trying to teach them. If I take their hand and I move them, their memory neurons might feel what it feels like to be there, but they're not going to know what it took to get there, right? So let's go back. Okay. Forceful touching, I've seen this a lot too. Again, I'm sure I've done it at some point in my career. I don't do it anymore, but this idea of like pushing on somebody or, you know, I can imagine, luckily I've never had this happen. I can imagine that assist where you push on the pelvis in downward dog could cause problems or exacerbate a pre-existing injury if somebody's coming in with like a slip disc or a bulging disc or something like that. So I have done that assist, but we have to remember that we don't know everything in every student that's coming in and what they're coming in with. So I typically only do anything that has force in it with people I really know I'm very comfortable with. And I wouldn't do it just to anybody that I didn't have a relationship with. And usually my relationships with people in the studio go into that yoga therapy vein. So I've done a postural assessment on them. I know if they have any like underlying conditions that might cause them issues if I was to adjust them in this way. So I'm prepared. But if we go into it cold, just in a regular studio, and offer an adjustment or assist that's forceful, we could really cause issues. I've also seen people, have you guys seen people adjust and assist in like Supta Baddha Konasana? Like where they put their hands on the thighs to push the thighs down. Has anybody seen this assist? Yeah? I don't recommend doing that. There's a couple reasons I don't recommend doing it. One of them, it's very vulnerable, right? Another thing is you just don't know how far their hip flexors are gonna let you take them. So I would just, personally, I stay away from stuff like that. Another one we've all seen, and I think I've got a picture of it here for us, is this particular one. Oh, wait, hold on. This one, I've seen it even when they've taken their hands and pull their hands. Have you guys seen that? Where they pull their hands, they stand behind and pull their hands. I would avoid it. Again, I'm not saying it's bad or wrong. I'm just saying it has more propensity to cause injury. We don't want to cause injury in our students. No teacher wants to do that. So, you know, maybe that's one we avoid. Any questions? Okay. Okay, so many of these things happened to me in gymnastics growing up. Yep, I totally bet. So plantar fasciitis is a really good thing to talk about right now. So a lot of times you will see teachers will cue to descend your heels in downward dog. Well, if you have had or have currently plantar fasciitis, which is a sort of a fraying of the plantar tendon where it connects to the heel, then that is going to really be excruciating. And I've heard stories of teachers coming over and taking people's heels and trying to push them down to the ground. And people who have plantar fasciitis or have had it in the past, that's horribly painful. So just remembering that, you know, some of these things would, on a normal, regular person that does not have any injuries or any pre-existing conditions, might be just fine. But on somebody who has some wear and tear, has been living in their body, you know, I mean, it's not going to be the best feeling for some people. Okay. All right. So here's some body positionings that we're going to go over. So there is a way to assist and there's a way not to assist. So I was going to show you guys some pictures, but I'll let you do your own Googling because I don't want to throw any teachers under the bus. But if you Google bad assist, you will see some bad assist, okay? And a lot of them are from, you know, some of them guys are actually from people in our lineage. And I've gotten this question before. People have said to me, why do you include certain teachers, right? Two of them right off the bat. One of them is Satchidananda, and one of them is Patabi. Well, I don't actually teach you what they taught. So first of all, that's one thing. And I am not a part of that community that was that has had a negative experience with those teachers. And I honor the people who have had negative experiences. If you don't know what I'm talking about, several years ago, Swami Satchidananda, the ashram of Swami Satchidananda, was implicated in a sort of string of sexual assaults. And so there are a lot of people who have really tried to like say, okay, I'm not, and that's why it's actually why we don't recommend his Yoga Sutras book. It was a Yoga Sutras book that was used in my training, and I don't recommend using it because A, I don't like you reading commentary, because then I feel like it separates you from the experience. But B, also because of this thing, you know, we just haven't been endorsing it. But we can't take these people like out of our history. Like we can say, okay, we don't necessarily condone the way they assisted, the way they touched, the way that their, whatever intention was behind their touch. But unfortunately, they are part of the history. I mean, it goes back to some of the leaders, you know, in the last 200-300 years in our history as a whole world, as a culture, have not been the greatest role models, maybe have not made the best choices. Maybe they've even, you know, committed, you know, acts against humanity and, you know, things that are now in the history books as, you know, really, really tragic events, but we still have them in the history books. Does that make sense? Like, that's why they're part of that overarching lineage, but we don't want to use their techniques. Okay, so some of the techniques that were used, especially in the last, you know, 60 years in yoga, were not appropriate. And so there are certain appropriate stances that we have. So mountain pose is one stance. I can stand in mountain pose behind a student, in front of a student, what have you, and that is an acceptable way to assist. Horse pose, it's like sort of a slightly lifted sort of squat. So you're in like a squat. Your center of gravity has gotten lower to the ground. Hip to hip, I'm going to show you guys that after lunch. That's a nice stabilizing posture. One knee down is a nice way to also stabilize and adjust. Seated is another option for adjusting, especially back bends. Wide-legged is another option, and then kneeling or stabilizing. So we're going to show all of those after lunch. That's the position of the body. Now we need to talk about the position of the hands. So open palms are really a good rule of thumb. So open palms are a good rule of thumb. If I'm going to clasp for rotation, I'm not grabbing. I'm just gently wrapping my hands. Again, my fingers are closed, right? Pause, not claws, guys. Pause, not claws. This is like one of my favorite things to say about assist. We want to put our fingers or our hands on people in a way that instills that we are confident in what we're doing. There's a finger spread technique when you're doing belly down back bends. I'm going to show you where the hands are like this on the shoulder blades in the back of the body. And then cross wrists, like I showed you earlier. This cross wrist assist is one that you can use depending on the pose. So I think we're where we need to be before we go to partner work and some demos. So do we have any questions?
Yeah, Michelle, when you were talking about only teach what you know, is that, would you, if you understand and you've been able to get as far as you can into a pose and you understand where it needs to go further, would you teach that? Like when you couldn't do the bottom of the binded chair pose, I forgot what it's called, but would you teach that even though your body won't go into it all the way?
Sure. If you know the mechanics of it and you know how to teach it, if you haven't felt it in your body, I suggest highly not adjusting it. Okay, just because if you haven't felt it in your body, you can't, it's hard. It's like almost like, you know, if we haven't had a thought and somebody else has a thought, we're like, wow, that's a fact. I wasn't even aware of that, right? Well, adjusting is sort of the same. If you haven't felt it in your body, you're not really aware of it, right? The same way. So if you can't get into, like, let's say a chair pose twist really tightly and to open up your arms and all that good stuff, you know, you might cue somebody to get into it, but you might not physically put your hands on them to get into it. Yeah. Other questions?
Okay, I do have another question. It's a personal thing. I have in my shoulders, I've noticed like they've been opening up a lot since I've been doing the yoga. And I have a lot of like crackling feelings, but no pain involved in them. Is that a thing that I need to worry about, or is it only if it hurts?
Did we have a physio on? Or who spoke up earlier when I was talking about the joints? Okay, I can speak only from a yoga therapy standpoint. Okay, so I can't speak to what's going on. It sounds, and on again, I really hesitate to even speak to it at all. If you're not having pain, you can go to your full range of motion. The second you start having pain, you need to back off. Okay, so I don't know what that crackling is. I know that with joints, there are a couple of different reasons joints pop. It depends on, is there air in the joint, or it depends on, you know, like if a tendon, a ligament is sort of rolling over a joint, that can cause some stuff too. And inherently, I don't think those are dangerous things. That said, if you start doing it and you start noticing sensation starts turning into like mild discomfort, that's when you stop. Don't let yourself get to the point where it's like painful.
Okay, thank
you. Yeah, be really aware of it when you're going into stuff like that, so that you know, like I injured myself, my shoulder at some point when I was in training, and I felt the pull when I went up into wheel, and I still went up. What I should have done was come right down. Yeah.
I have a quick question, Michelle. This is Liza. Can you maybe send us some links, or maybe put it in the checklist guidelines where we can look at the wrong ways to do any kind of like touching, or like you said, the bad assist? Yeah, I did actually look it up, but I didn't really get anything. So
one in particular. Now you have to remember Ashtanga has a lot of things that are very vulnerable postures anyway. I forget what the name of it is, but there's the one where your feet are behind your head, right? And so you're okay. Side note, my kids in middle school, they had to learn a song about inappropriate touch. And so they call it their no-no square. So like your no-no square is like out for everybody to see, right? And so there used to be an adjustment where the teacher would lay on top of you. Okay, well, what's happening when the teacher's laying on top of you and your no-no square is out in the air? You know, I'll just leave it up for your imagination. So those old types of assists are not appropriate anymore. You know, a lot of the older teachers, and I'm saying this with all due respect because I can't speak to what they were doing. I'm not one of their students. I didn't experience it. You know what I'm saying? But they would do things like, you know, putting their hands in certain places. You've got to really be careful with men, guys, okay? Men's pelvis is smaller than a woman's. So if you put your hands too far inside a man's pelvis, men who are on this call, you know what's going to happen. You're going to like cop a feel of something you don't want to cop a feel of. So it's like really important to like maintain space between you and the person's center midline, right? So I don't ever want my fingers, if my fingers are wrapping around this pelvis, so this is a man's pelvis, a female's pelvis is much broader, okay? So see how if my hands are here, I'm almost in his space, in his personal space. So I don't want my hands to be here. I want them to be like back here on the iliacs, because if your hands are on the iliac, guys, you're protected. Does that make sense? They're protected. Everybody's protected. Your hands are on the iliacs. The iliacs come up above the glutes, right? So the iliacs are much higher than you think they are. Like put your hands on the back of your body where your sacrum meets your iliac bones. And then see if you can't trace up to the top of your iliac bone. That's much higher than your glute, right? Feeling it? Yes? Yeah, much higher than your glute. And see if my hands are touching that top of my iliac, my fingers are not wrapping around to the front of the pelvis. So now I'm safe. and I don't have to worry about touching the front of the body where I don't want to touch the front of the body. Yes, did that help, Liza?
Yeah, it did. And I didn't actually realize it was inappropriate. I just thought it was like just bad, like pulling or something like that, pulling the back or something, you know.
So that one I showed you, like anytime you're pulling the hands, alternatively, I'm going to show you what to do instead.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Load optimization. So Mira, what would you like to know about load optimization? So I'm happy to talk about it. I just want to know what your question is. So if you want to type it to me, you can feel free and I'll answer it. Any other questions? Was this helpful? Was it different than Christine's?
Yes.
Okay, good. Okay, good. Awesome. So what we're gonna do after lunch, I'm happy to answer questions. You guys definitely have me for like another 15 minutes or so, 15, 20 minutes. So we can ask any questions you want now. But what we're gonna do after lunch is I'm gonna spend the first part after lunch using my lovely children to show you how to adjust. And it's gonna be pretty authentic because this is what you're going to see and why you would need to adjust them. Now, for those of you who have asked me questions about child yoga or yoga for children, typically you would not do this, okay? Children can do whatever they want in yoga. They can literally do whatever they want. Their growth plates haven't finished growing. I don't care what their downward dog looks like. In fact, when you see Alexis's, it's sort of funny. It's more like a plank, but that's because her body hasn't finished growing yet. And so like her arms, her legs, her torso, everything is not yet proportionate. So I'm going to show you on my children, but know that if you were actually working with children, you would just let them do whatever they want. Up until they're like 18, 19 years old, I wouldn't mess with them, you know? And then after that, it's not about fixing them. It's about helping them to properly balance the load in their body and create a little bit more comfort and effort. Like we want them to feel like they're working. This shouldn't be a walk in the park. You know, downward dog is not a resting pose, right? Child's pose is a resting pose. Warrior one is not a resting pose. Like, so we want them active and engaged when they're in it. So when they become adults and you can start working with them to develop these awarenesses of the muscles and their proprioception, you always couch it by, okay, I'm gonna help you to develop a deeper relationship with your asana practice. They're not wrong. They just are going to develop now a deeper relationship. They played with the poses for a while. Now they're going to learn how it feels in their body if they engage different muscles. Yes, question.
Michelle, I have a question. This is Rogelio here in New Jersey again. So we're doing this therapy part to yoga. And then we have trauma-informed yoga. And we're talking about trauma and working with individuals that may have experienced some level of trauma. And then we're talking about ideally anatomy and where we would textbook we would want them to be. What I've been instructed to do in those situations is to work with the student wherever they're at.
Yes.
And move forward. I know there's a module somewhere that deals with trauma-informed yoga, which I think I'm not there yet. But if you can speak to that, it would be very helpful to me.
Yes, and so just so everybody knows, trauma-informed yoga that's in the 300-hour is just the base content. We're gonna do a whole weekend just like this on trauma-informed yoga. So that is an important piece. And actually, I think when we do it live, it's so much better than the just pre-recorded version is not as rich as when you do it with a bunch of people and you can talk and you can all experience like a more interactive exchange. But trauma-informed yoga is very delicate, and there's a lot of different pieces to it. And the way I use it as a yoga therapist, working with therapists, especially in clinical settings, is a little different than maybe the way other people work with it. So my perspective is from a clinical perspective as an integrative complementary therapy. Does that make sense? Where I think a lot of the trauma-informed yoga out there, or yoga certifications out there, may be teaching people how to hold space in a in like a public class. We try to cover that as well, but my intention is much more clinical than it is just general population. But typically I don't work so much with alignment when it comes to trauma-informed. When it comes to trauma-informed, I'm working with getting them to connect to their breath and having them feel safe, secure, empowered, connected. I want them to be able to vocalize. I want them to be able to connect to their intuition. So it's actually very energetic. It's very chakra-based. And so basically, I'm gonna really watch out for, I'm not going to put them into postures that are vulnerable postures. So for example, I wouldn't use like Supta Baddha Konasana. I wouldn't be touching people in a trauma-informed setting. I would be doing a lot more cueing and demoing in a trauma-informed setting. Again, always making sure that I'm in their line of sight. When I teach a traditional class, I move around the room a lot. When I teach a trauma-informed class, I'm gonna stay front and center more. You know, I might walk around and stuff, but people get real uneasy when you walk behind them, you know, especially if you've had trauma. Do you really want somebody walking behind you, you know? I also am very particular about like Shavasana when it comes to trauma-informed settings, because a lot of people are fragile in that state. It's a vulnerable state. Your eyes are closed. You're basically trusting the instructor. So the instructor has to create very, very structured boundaries. So I always tell people, you know, we've come to the end of class. I'm gonna, you know, get everybody into Shavasana. Please remain on your mat until I call you out of Shavasana. And I do that because some people are new, or maybe they get anxious. You know, if you feel like you need to sit up during Shavasana at any time, please do that for yourself. So those are the types of like ways that I modify. But when it comes to the physical practice and assisting and adjusting, I typically don't do a lot of touch. I don't do any actually. And I rely much more on cueing. I might bring my hand in front of them and say, bring your knee to my palm. Something like that, just very benign. But I'm not gonna do like the bigger, gross muscular adjustments like I would if I wasn't working in that situation. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you very much.
Now with yoga therapy, I take a whole different perspective. So with yoga therapy, I'm gonna work with them in yoga therapy. There's gonna be a physical component, there's gonna be an intellectual, an emotional, and a spiritual component to that. And so the physical component might be, you know, using an asana practice to help them to feel more contained, to help them to get into their body, to help them to identify sensations that are present in their body. But then they may end up being activated by those sensations, right? So then I have to teach them tools like titration, where I'm slow, slow, slow. So we're only like, oh, like what can we touch one sensation and then come back to our resource, our inner resource. So I have to teach them inner resourcing. And then I have to work with them on, you know, cultivating a relationship with the felt sense of well-being. And then I'm taking them to any thoughts, feelings, memories, sensations that might be present. And, you know, what does it feel like in their body? Can you name the sensation? Is it too much for you? Okay, now can you come back to your inner resource? And then maybe that's all we do that session. And slowly, 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 we're working into these sensations that are more activating. If I can get them into like a sort of a pattern where we can work with the sensations, the thoughts, the feelings that are coming up for them in their asana practice or in their pranayama practice, or even in yoga nidra, because stuff comes up in yoga nidra too, then we can start working with pendulation. So pendulation is when you're back and forth between the sensations. So and this is a lot of like Dr. Levine's work in somatic therapy and somatic experiencing, and Richard Miller's work in iRest is where I draw from this stuff. That's sort of my background and training. So I'll work with, you know, okay, now we've gotten to the place where you can hold space for this experience, this sensation that comes up around this experience. Now, can you be with that sensation? And when you get overwhelmed, can you go back to your inner resource? Can you go back to your inner resource? Can you feel that inner resource as a felt sense of well-being in your body? And now when you're comfortable again, can you go back to the other feeling? Is it less? And what we're trying to do is depolarize the reaction to the sensation that might be associated with the trauma. Does that answer the other question about yoga therapy?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. I would never in a million years use those techniques in a public class that's trauma informed. Not even ever in a million years. That is reserved for private clients that you're working with. And a lot of times people will hear that you're trauma informed or you're certified in trauma informed, and they'll want you to work with them like a therapist. And I just tell them, no, that's not what this is. This is to help you to develop a relationship with your body, that mind, body, spirit connection. This is to help you to feel safe in your body. This is to help you to depolarize your body's autonomic, you know, it's reaction to this. Because what happens is, you know, when we're talking about the brain and we're talking about what happens in trauma, you know, the hippocampus is part of this process, and the amygdala and all these things, and they're sending signals to the brain every time something that looks like, feels like, sounds like the trauma. It reinforces that samskara, and the nervous system goes into hyperarousal, and then the person gets activated, right? That's what we call activation. And a lot of people call it triggered. I don't use the word triggered because of so many people having experiences with guns or with, you know, stuff like that. So I use the word activation, but I reserve some techniques are for one-on-ones and yoga therapy. Some techniques are for the general population, but you really have to know your audience. Yeah. Any other questions, comments about any of that?
Can I ask something about trauma informed? I'm in the 200 hours, and for the last module of the 7 and 8, it's about creating sequence. And I don't know so many people that speak English, and I know this girl that helped me because she speaks English and she was interested, and so like I'm giving her like classes to help like do this module, and we were like doing yoga together, not like so much like I'm teaching and you do, but like, oh, we practice together. And like she was in downward dog, and I thought, oh, maybe she could bend the knee to have more ease. So I told her, and I felt like she kind of felt like disturbed by this, and like because like she had like kind of traumatic life, and you know, like now it's okay, but like a few months ago was like many things happened for her. So like I felt like now she's like even like sorry for being, you know, like, and I felt like, oh, maybe if I give her adjustment, she feel like she's not doing things right, and she feels sorry all the time. And I would like to help her to feel more empowered and like accept the way she is, because she has a lot of light to give, you know. So I was wondering if you're like advice of things that I could do to help empower, or like things that could like activate her in the other way.
Yeah. So I would recommend starting with like positive projection. So like you are exactly where you need to be. You are perfect just the way you are. My teacher used to say, you are perfect just the way you are. You don't need to do another pose. And guys, I bought it. Hit hook, line, and sinker. And so it really does change the way you feel about yourself and the way you feel about your practice. I do not want any of our teachers to go out and use negative projection. Okay, so, and I talk about this in training. Negative projection is like, you know, when you come in and you've had a bad day and you basically project your story onto people, right? in your classes, and we've all probably experienced a teacher or two that has done that, right, in our yoga experience life. But there's nothing wrong with saying you have everything you need, you are fully supported in this experience, because that's actually true. You know, the divinity that is breathing us is supporting us. It is giving us life. It is literally, it is being for us. We are in being with divinity. And so you are always supported in your experience. We can remind people of that. We can remind people that they have everything they need. Now, I will warn you, I've worked in a lot of like clinical settings with people who are working with, you know, deep depression, bipolar, dissociative identity disorder. And if you are in a deep, deep, deep low spot and your teacher tells you you have everything you need and you are perfect just the way you are, they're going to look at you and be like, F you, that's not true. I don't feel that way. I can't feel that. I can't access that, right? And so you just have to understand that you can offer this to people, you can offer these positive projections to people, but it might not land, right? And so it's okay to give it a shot. There's nothing wrong with that. But they might say, no, you don't understand. You don't understand what I've done. You don't understand, you know, what my past is like, you know, stuff like that. And that's like their material to work through. And again, that's not our job. What we hope as teachers and what we are really, really going for, and I feel like we are successful when students take practice and they develop a relationship with their practice that supports them doing their internal work. That's called svadhyaya, okay? When you have taken a student from just interested in yoga, oh, I want better arms. That's why I came to yoga. Like, oh, I want better arms, right? So I came to yoga, and then I was like, oh, wow, wait a second. I'm a kinder, more compassionate mom. Let's stay with this. And then I start taking the principles of Patanjali's Yoga Sutras and applying them to my relationship with my kids, my husband, myself. And then I was like, holy moly, all this searching, I've just been wanting somebody to love me, and I've really been wanting myself to love me. Wow, you know, and so that's what we hope that they wake up to. That's like the ideal. But honestly, we can just offer little seeds, and every time we offer a seed, it lands. Some germinate now, some germinate later. The truth always comes through, though, you know.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions before we break for lunch? Awesome. Yeah. Yeah. Yoga has the power to change your entire world. And these adjustments and assists that we're talking about really are a mirror for the adjustments and assists that we want our students to make in their life, right? So my hips cocked off in, you know, Warrior 2, right? Or my knees not aligned over my ankle in Warrior 2. So I bring my awareness to that. Now I notice, oh yeah, my knee's not aligned up. Oh, I always do that. And then I'm off the mat. Now I'm at the grocery store and I notice that, you know, I always pick up the same box of Cheerios or whatever. And then I'm out with my friends and I notice that this one type of thing always bothers me. Well, see, this is the part, this is the seed that starts the deeper exploration of self. And when we start to notice the patterns in our physical body and how we practice our asana and how that physical samskara is manifesting in our body, we automatically start to notice how samskaras are manifesting in the intellectual, emotional, and spiritual bodies as well. The physical body, you know, Annie Carpenter is my teacher's teacher, and I don't have a relationship with her. I've never studied with her, but I have seen a couple things that she said. And one of the things I really liked is she said, we all have a body. We can all come to yoga through the body. It's the one commonality that we all have, right? Is we have that physical embodiment. Now, how we perceive ourselves in the world and how we perceive our experiences, that might differ from person to person to person, but the physical body leads us into the practice of yoga, the practice of developing a relationship with the spirit, the body, the mind, and realizing and recognizing that those aren't separate. is what unlocks the key and awakens us to our enlightened state of being. Yeah. Awesome, guys. Okay, so we're going to be doing a lot of demoing after lunch. I'll see you guys in an hour. And I'm going to just shut the meeting off so that we'll close this recording and we'll start a new one when we come back in.